Hello. What we're going to do now is have a look at my picture book about Glenological chemistry. So this is chemistry that is developed off the work of Rudolf Steiner, and all I'm really doing is applying observation techniques to what's right in front of us. We're looking at the basis of chemistry and very fundamental structural organizations and looking at them as a circle. Because, of course, chemistry is atomic. And so all of these atoms and molecules are spherical, energetically spherical. And so it question arose for me, why wouldn't we organize chemistry according to a sphere or a slice of a sphere, the circle? And by observing what's there, we come up with a new interpretation of chemistry and how we can work with chemistry. When we come to chemistry, what we see is this periodic table of elements across the top of this chart. And what we have in the periodic table is that there are three groups of elements. Now, when we look at this rectangular chart, they're all somewhat grouped together, and particularly with the transition elements, we see them as part almost of the major elements, because in this chart we're following atomic weight. As we sort of move up the layers of this chart, we're just increasing the atomic weight of each of the elements. And so the transition elements actually get placed in this position, and it's very easy to see them as really just part of this cluster of the major elements. And indeed, Jan Schulten, the homeopath, his book on chemistry does this, runs them as a sort of conglomerate group. Whereas what we can see is that they have quite a distinct nature, the different groups of elements. And the major elements, we know there's 8 groups of those. And with the transition elements from group 3 to group 12, there's 10 groups of those. And then when we come down to the lanthanoids and actinoids down the bottom of the chart, there's 14 of those. And so we have these different number phenomena with regards to these elements. And, you know, when we're looking at an energetic activity of the universe, with everything interacting with everything else, you know, it has been discovered, you know, with music, that there are these harmonic resonant tones that exist. And so if we look at chemistry in the same way, because of course chemistry has just organized itself out of the universal harmonic, and so we can see that the major elements are the 4th harmonic. There's 8 of them. The trace elements are the 5th harmonic, and the lanthanoids and actinoids are the 7th harmonic. And so we can see them as layers in creation that settle out. They actually manifest. And so this is the first observation that we can make about this group of elements. Now, there's a whole story then when we come to look at the orientation of the elements. And the first orientation challenge is the major elements. And I have to say that Dr. Hauschka's Nature of Substance played quite a hand in me appreciating how these elements all relate to the circle, because of course we can bring all of our previous information about the circle that we got from biodynamic agriculture and see how that fits in as a reference for the planetary for the chemical activities as well. All of my thoughts on chemistry I've written into a book called Glenological Chemistry. It's available at our website. All these things are free for you to have and read. So read all of those things. Now, the next thing that we can do is, once we have looked at the trace elements and the lanthanides, we can and have organized them on a circle, then we can put these three things one on top of the other, because those elements that are in the similar parts of the circle are going to have a similar resonance of activity, even though they might be functioning in a different dimension of the sphere. It's a similar resonance. So we can put them all together and come with this picture here. Earlier in biodynamic agriculture, we talked about the three stages of manifestation. And in this circle picture that we have in biodynamic agriculture, we had the rings diagram, and then we had the arms diagram, and they fit over each other. And so the rings diagram is like the first stage of the story. And when things move and polarization occurs, we get the arms diagram, which is the second stage of the story. And then once we come to chemistry and we start all dealing with matter and substance, then we come into the third part of the story. And that part of the story revolves around these four elements of protein that Rudolf Steiner talked about in lecture 3 of the agriculture course and the medical lectures, of course. And what we can see is that we have these four axes in the gyroscope, and that carbon is the carrier of the physical axis. So nitrogen is the carrier of the horizontal axis. Oxygen is the carrier of the green diagonal axis. And hydrogen, which is right in the middle, is the carrier of the vertical spirit axis. So each of these physical axes organize themselves into positive cations and negative anion polarities. And so we have this third stage of organization that we can observe and use available in the story of chemistry. Before we move on, we can have a look at this bottom right picture, which is the labyrinth in the Chartres Cathedral. And I'm just putting this here as a teaser for you to consider. This next picture is, again, a thought form of chemistry. But this time we're coming at it from the biodynamic agricultural direction. And so we can see the top of this picture is the story that we had in biodynamic agriculture, where we're getting the rings diagram, which really we can see as cosmic physical, cosmic etheric, cosmic astral, and cosmic spirit. And then we come into the movement of creation, and this creates polarities of world and internal activities. And then the game we played was to get this circle and put it on top of this circle and the rings. And what that brings up is the big picture on the left, which is all the energetic activities in a circle. And the next picture is Rudolf Steiner's language that he uses for those energetic activities. And what we can do once we have this organization of the circle here is that we can place chemistry over the top of it. And this indicates the energetic activity of all of chemistry. Down the bottom left, we again have the third stage of chemistry indicated in the petals, the small petals. And again, on the right-hand side, this is three-dimensional chemistry, which we will come to. And again, this is a teaser. This is where we put all of the information together from the agriculture course, the energetic activities, and chemistry. And I apologize for the planetary symbols not being present. This slide I call Glenological Chemistry because this is what we have in front of us to consider. We have 3 layers of chemistry, and we also have 3 layers of organization: the cosmic, the world and internal, and then we have chemistry, the manifest layer. This picture is of the trace elements. There's a very interesting phenomena about the trace elements. As we can see in the top left picture, they're placed to the left. On this diagram, it's to the left. And we can see that half of them are in the internal etheric, and the other half are in the world physical. Something to observe. The second thing we can observe about the trace elements is the story told by Dr. Hauschka in Nature of Substance, and it's called The Brothers of Iron in that chapter. And what he points out is, while the trace elements are organized according to their atomic weight, when we look at their melting points and their order of hardness, what we come to is that in the normal periodic table, the elements come by atomic weight. And so we have calcium being followed by scanadium, for example, all the way through to zinc, and that the order goes from calcium to zinc to copper to nickel and around to gallium. And so what we can do with that, of course, is flip these elements into a lemniscate with the periodic table, and then see what that does. And we can see that there's these different rings of the circle, and that the trace elements actually begin at the etheric ring and then have the astral and the spirit. But we can also look at the process of how the planets organize. And when we have a number 5 with the planets, then we look at how Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and Mercury organize as a structure. And we see, in a sense, the sun and the moon outside this organization. And so we can put the trace elements around the circle in their order, and we can see where the internal etheric and where the world physical activities fits. And we can see which planets are being influential in their organization and activity. And so with all of this information, we get pictures of the energetic activity of those elements. A similar process can be seen when we come to the lanthanides and the actinides. And there's 7 of those. And so, first of all, these are sitting on the outermost ring of the periodic table. So this is this cosmic spirit ring. And so we can identify that these elements would have an influence on the way in which the spirit works. And my experience has said that the lanthanide elements work on the internal spirit and how that functions in our life. And the actinides are dealing much more with the world and cosmic spirit's influence into our life. But again, we can organize these according to the planets. And at the same time, we can, in the bottom picture, extend those references to the zodiac and the energetic bodies that are related to these different quadrants. And then also we can look at how these energies work as cardinal, fixed and mutable to create these quadrants of activity. So all of these information can be used to help identify the energetic activity of these elements. Now, the next picture is a 3-dimensional periodic table. And again, we have to look at how chemistry is a sphere. It's an energetic sphere. It's not just that 2-dimensional plane that we've been using so far. And we have 3 planes, 3 groups of elements. And so the question is, how will we allot these 3 groups of elements to a 3-dimensional structure? And some leading thoughts for me were that the major elements would be a prime vertical, because in a sense the prime vertical has to organize first. And then when we come to the trace elements, these are all the elements that are involved in biochemistry. They help to spark off biochemical reactions within the soup of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon and sulfur. They, all these trace elements work as these sparkers into further biochemical interactions. And so these are the elements of life. And where do we find life in the 3-dimensional solar system and the 3-dimensional galaxy? Where do we find it? And of course, it's on the horizontal plane. The sun is on the horizontal plane of the galaxy, and the Earth is on the horizontal plane of the solar system. And on Earth, we find life. So it makes sense to put the elements of life on that horizontal plane, which of course leaves the 3rd ring, which is this spiritual ring, as the second vertical, spirit being a vertical axis. And so this is then what we get when we put those together. And of course, we have to look at both of those options of the rings sphere and then the arms sphere. There's a change in this picture from the orientation to the Northern Hemisphere zenith to the Earth's magnetic field, because chemistry organizes according to magnetism. And so we have to make this change of orientation. So the eastern point that was on the left in many of the other diagrams is now on the right hand side. And so we have this change of orientation from now on. Just as we looked at the Latinites and the trace elements by their planetary rulers, we can put them onto this chart and see how they become very important indicators of the quality of those groups of elements. And by doing this, we also can allot the rulerships of the zodiac to this diagram. A question arose for me as to how can we see more specifically the influences of chemistry into the living organism or the manifest organism. And while we can see the pictures so far that we've been looking at are orientated on the world physical body, the answer came back to me is, why don't you all look at the picture based on the internal physical body? And when we do that, this is what we get. And one of the most interesting things is that all of Rudolf Steiner's stories, and especially what Dr. Hauschka has added to that story, starts to come alive within this circular periodic table. And we can start applying this threefold plant to chemistry. And we see that in the soil, the aluminium phosphate is in the soil. And then as we come to the next layer, we have carbon and nitrogen and boron. And humus is the place where nitrogen and boron become most stable. And so with the help of the carbon and the hydrogen and oxygen, we have this stable development of humus. And then when we come to the next layer, we see all these elements of calcium, magnesium, sulfur, selenium are involved in leaf growth of plants. And then when we come to the metabolics pole of plants, where we have the flowering and the fruiting, we see that sodium chloride, potassium chloride are involved in stimulating the flowering of plants. And so within the periodic table, we have this threefold plant sitting there. So we can look at that and observe and so forth. When we look to this top picture, this is when we look at how the metallic states of the elements are organized, and they become increasingly less dense as we go around the circle until we come to the noble gases at the top. And what we can see is that we have this polarity showing up between these consolidating forces of the cations over here in the metals with the non-metals and gases that are sitting opposite them. And so we get this contractive as opposed to an expansive process taking place on the horizontal, but we can also see a similar process on the vertical axis as well. So we can bring all of these qualities into our understanding of how these elements are going to work with each other. In this picture, I'm bringing together the information from Dr. Steiner's 1920 and 1921 medical lectures, along with the image that he gave in, I believe, the first lecture of 1924 pastoral medicine lectures. And we can again look at this threefold organization of the human and the plant and so on, with the head in the soil and the metabolic system to the top. And we can see all of these different references that play in to how the energetic activities work. And then we can see that we can place this over chemistry. And this gives us quite a complex reference system for looking at chemistry. And of course, we're not just stuck with that one ring of elements that I've put in the top picture, but we can see that that brings the reference of the internal physical body. And of course, if we want to work with these processes that are indicated in the top picture, we can work with them at an etheric level, at an astral level, and also a spirit level. And so we're gaining a lot of information about how the whole of chemistry can be understood and used. This is just a thought exercise to see what is the most physical, most manifest orientation that we can find. And so we can focus on stage 3, organization. We can focus on the internal physical body orientation, and we can focus on magnetic orientation to gain the most manifest image. I've been fascinated by the cathedral builders, which were, in a sense, the Knights Templar and the Normans. Of course, they brought back so much wisdom from the Islamic culture that they came across during the Crusades period. And they, I believe, were building these energetic resonators that were there to help organize the humans' energetic bodies back into a harmonic order so that the humans could evolve and we could move on from all of the murdering of the Dark Ages and previous times and move towards cultured society. And to do this, of course, all of the energetic bodies needed to be organized and harmonic so that the humans could be at peace. And I believe were building these energetic resonators that were there to help organize the humans' energetic bodies back into a harmonic order so that the humans could evolve and we could move on from all of the murdering of the Dark Ages and previous times and move towards cultured society. And to do this, of course, all of the energetic bodies needed to be organized and harmonic so that the humans could be at peace. And I believe this is what the cathedrals are doing. And particularly when we come to the Chartres Cathedral, we're looking at these labyrinths that were built in many different cathedrals. And I've written an article about this. But it's very interesting that while most cathedrals are orientated on an east-west axis, the Chartres Cathedral is orientated on a northeast, southwest axis. And of course, this places it in orientation with the internal physical body. This moves it on to a stage 3 resonance. And so when we look at these resonating devices that were created, we can assume that this labyrinth may well organize according to the universal plan, and that we can place chemistry over the labyrinth, and that at those specific points on the labyrinth would be the place where we could experience the harmonic resonance of those elements. And so not only can we stand in those places, but we can also collect remedies off those places. And by using a Bach flower remedy sort of methodology, we can get a glass bottle with some water in it, and we can place it on those positions, and we can then collect those elements. And now this is possible out of any circle, because all circles resonate with spheres, and everything in creation is an energetic sphere. Now, we can look at these rings that are in the labyrinth, and we can allot particular planetary activities to each of those rings. So this helps add another layer of interpretation to the effects of these elements. Another one of these forms that was created by the Knights Templar, the octagon-shaped chapter houses, and there's 4 or 5 of them in England. One is Westminster Cathedral, another is Salisbury Cathedral, and there's 2 others. So we can have a look at the chapter house and place the elements into the chapter house. And again, on those particular points in the chapter house, you should be able to collect those energies and experience those energies. Now, this is a picture that I've done for the planets to help understand the effects of the planets on humans in particular. And we can break this up into Rudolf Steiner concepts. And he talked a lot about the thinking, feeling, and willing. And we can see the planets in that regard, that at the top of the picture, it's really the Earth, and we come out from the Earth and we see this personal unconscious realm, and we have the planets of Mercury, Moon, and Mars. So these are primary activities of the thinking. So this is your personal thoughts and your way of communicating and your opinions. The moon is your feelings, your emotions, and how you are personally nurtured. And Mars is your personal actions and how you feel impulsed to do things. And we then move to the next layer, is where we interact with the world. And so we get thoughts that are coming from other people and thoughts that we share with other people. So this is education and travel and interactions with other cultures and other thoughts and so forth. Whereas at Venus, we're interacting with other people on a feeling level. And so this governs relationships, but it also governs this non-verbal communication that we have with others through art forms. And then Saturn, of course, is where we're interacting with the world and the rules that the world is putting upon us. But at the same time, these soul forces that we've got over living through our lives and gaining of experience that allow us to consolidate our actions into physical forms. And then, of course, the next level is where we're interacting with the whole of humanity. And so the thinking, but this is also the collective unconscious. So these are all the thoughts and feelings that are embedded in the world energetic field. So this is the energetic body of the Earth. The magnetic field of the Earth can contain all of these resonances that have been put there by all of the people and animals and so forth that have ever lived. And so this is like a big computer holding all of these memories in this big silicon chip of the Earth's magnetic field. And so when we have a thought and we put that out into the field feeds back to us. And this is Uranus. This is the inspiration that comes. And this also, of course, is a very strong emphasis towards your own individuality. Now, when we do that emotionally and put out feelings into the field feeds back with imaginations. And this is the planet Neptune. And this can be very mystical, clairvoyant, but can also be very dreamy, vague, and delusory. And of course, once the physical body is starting to be impacted by these collective activities that are coming into our lives, we really have to deal consciously with these energetic activities. And this is where we come into the realm of the shaman, who is physically dealing with these collective forces. But Pluto is also this atomic energy that transforms matter. And so the existing structures that Saturn develops, Pluto comes along and changes and transforms. And then we have at the bottom, the next layer out is really the spirit layer of the sun. And of course, this is you, the individual. This is your spiritual individuality. And it's really up to you how you interact with these astral and collective unconscious activities. And this is what we see in your birth chart. We see where in this life did you start with regards to your astral body. Now, Rudolf Steiner, in a couple of lectures series that I've read, has talked about 3 more stages beyond what he called spirit man. And these are Trans-Pluto, Vulcan, and the Sun. And these are worth investigating, but these are actually states of spiritual enlightenment and full consciousness. And Trans-Pluto, Persephone, is really this unconditional love and seeing one species of humanity and functioning in a very compassionate manner. But it also has creative visualization as one of its talents. By organizing the spiritual forces, manifestation takes place. Vulcan has that process one step further, and that manifestation is instantaneous. And of course, the sun, again, is you, the individual, as the fully awake, spiritually creative individual. And in a sense, this is the original thought that leads to the process of creation. And so these are how I see the planet. So following on from the thought that everything is a sphere, and everything therefore organizes according to a universal plan and universal order that we've been talking about in chemistry, then it would stand to reason that everything in creation must be able to be found within the circle. And when I asked that question, I got this picture. And we can see that this is the internal spirit. And so this is really the human kingdom here. And this is this internal astral sphere. And this is the animal kingdom. And this is the internal etheric. And so this is the plant kingdom. And this is the internal physical. So this is the mineral kingdom. And I've then got Jan Schulten's biology, botany, and placed that in the diagram. And here I've used Eugene Kalisko's work on zoology to place all of these different animals in the different places of the diagram. And similarly, these basic structures of human psychology, and we can also see them at various levels. And so we could say there's, 6 levels of psychopathy, 6 levels of hysteria, and so on. So what this means is that, again, if we get our bottle of water and we place it on the specific spots of these different species, then we will be able to collect the energy of those species and use them as a remedy to control those species. And some of the research I've done has shown this to be true. To make that easier, I have come up with this chart so that we actually have the various species in number series, and that we can place those on this diagram just to make it easier to use. And so this becomes the circle of everything. And with this, we come to the conclusion of my commentary on my picture book. I hope this has been of interest and enlightening and provided access to the treasure map that is within this story.